Hey everyone, and welcome to Car Ray Rob.
I'm Ray.
I'm Rob, and welcome to our new podcast, Say Hello to My Little Film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everyone, and it is showtime, episode 4, Car Ray Rob. And Ray, this episode is yours.
Yes, I am the recommender this episode. I am getting in my groove. I am so ready to do this. But before I do it, Rob, just tell everybody who's new to this podcast what we're doing here.
Absolutely, Ray. What we do here at Say Hello to My Little Film is we give a fresh perspective on a retrospective review. Every week, you and I will recommend a movie to the other that we know the other person has not seen. So instead of getting our review, we're going to get theirs. And that's going to bring that new, fresh take on the retrospective review. And now, Ray, you did say that you are in your groove.
I did.
Pretty tough talk. So I want to know, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got? What do you got?
All right, Rob. So, admittingly to the audience, this podcast in theory is a little bit harder for me than it is for you. There's a lot of things that you've watched or we have watched together. But the movie that I'm presenting to you today, My Little Film, is an Academy Award-winning movie that
Okay.
you've not seen.
Okay.
This is rare,
That is rare.
and luckily I did love it. This movie is Coda,
Oh,
the
okay.
Apple TV streaming
Right.
movie, and you are new to Apple TV.
That's true. It's an interesting choice because, yeah, one of the main reasons I haven't seen it is because I
Haven't
have
had access.
haven't had access. Exactly. It's kind of an interesting new barrier to film in the
Mhm.
modern time. Is I haven't watched this because just don't subscribe to that
Right.
streaming service.
I don't have that platform. I can't see that movie.
exactly.
So for those of you out there who have not seen Coda, a quick little spoiler-free summary, I guess I would say, is this movie is about a teenage girl who is hearing abled, and the rest of her family is all deaf, and she has a love of music that she's trying to pursue while dealing with the challenges of having an all deaf family because she's basically the sole interpreter for the family. So they need her. She needs things as she's growing up and getting ready to go into college. She gets pulled in a lot of directions and has to deal with that struggle. The family has to deal with that struggle. That's kind of what the movie is. It's about it's about that. It's about how family works, and the unique perspective of it is on this family that's partly deaf and partly hearing.
Interesting. I remember I watched the trailer, when the movie, I guess, was announced, and it looked very interesting at the time. And the other interesting kind of facet is that there is an entire genre of deaf
Mhm.
films, deaf films made by deaf directors, and it's so. But I don't know if this actually fits into that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Matlin is in this movie.
Right. Okay.
The movie stars Emilia Jones, who we know from Lock and Key,
Oh, okay.
which is a graphic novel series we love,
Right,
and a TV show we've
hate.
seen. Yes. They're both great in this. Really, the whole cast is really good. So, I definitely think the acting you'll enjoy. I think there's some hallmarkiness to this movie
Mhm,
that I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I
mhm,
definitely would say I was surprised when it won Best Picture.
mhm.
But like I said, I do love this movie because I just think I think the family dynamic there's a realness to it. And
Mhm.
I've never been in a deaf family, or known one, so I'm not saying that I have any kind of inside perspective to that, but it just felt natural. A lot of things that happened felt like natural progressions, and just seeing the family work it out. Hey, when families end up loving each other, it's just a feel good thing, and so that's why the movie has a soft spot to me.
Sure. Well, and it's funny if you say it has kind of that Hallmarky feeling. I mean, how many Hallmark movies win Best Picture?
Not many.
So I mean, you gotta be elevated at least in some ways.
Yeah. I always like to bring some facts about the movie. So
Sure.
this is actually a 2014 French-Belgian, a remake of a 2014 French-Belgian film,
Oh,
which I
okay.
was not aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Then went in 2021 and premiered at Sundance, and then Apple TV picked it up from there. Um, but yeah, and I think, like you said, I think it is interesting the fact that it's pretty identifiable as a streaming movie,
Right.
and it won Best Picture too. Another little caveat to that whole thing.
Definitely. I'll actually say I have my own suspicion about whether I will or will not like this movie. But what do you think, man? What do you think?
Well, at the very least, I hope your wife is going to like it.
Oh, I'm sure she will.
Yes, and you are a fan of music.
That's true.
There's a great music teacher in this movie as well. But at the end of the day, I actually think you're going to think it's kind of mid. And the reason I say that is the first time I watched it, I liked it.
Okay.
And it was upon rewatches where I'm like, I know what, I actually do love this. I love how this stuff works together more. When I watch a movie, I'm all about arcs. I want to see arcs. I want to see progression of and growth of character. And I just feel like this movie does it. And upon my rewatches, I can move past the hallmarky moments. And I just really appreciate it. But I wonder on your first viewing, I think you're gonna be like, yeah, it's all right.
Underwhelmed, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Right.
So I'm not gonna oversell it right now.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, but again, like you said, it's Best Picture, so you
Yes.
already kind of have a little bit of expectation going in. And then, I remember watching the ceremony when it won, and I'm like, well, I haven't actually seen this movie,
Yeah.
so I guess I don't really know.
And I think one thing too is like when you win a Best Picture, I feel like there's like the cinematography. I wouldn't say is like special with this movie,
sure.
So I think that's one of the reasons why I always feel like, how did this win Best Picture? When I think the character stuff is great, but I don't know if there's much more other than that.
Sure. Well, I'm excited and ready to go. So Ray and I are going to take this time to go and watch Coda. We invite you to pause the podcast, watch it as well, come back and enjoy our discussion. If you have already watched it, we'll be back in just a few moments.
Ray and Rob are currently watching the film. You may be also watching the film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching the film. They'll be right back when they're done watching the film.
All right, we are back. Me and Rob have both watched Coda now. Rob, what do you think?
Well, I have to say, first thought out of my mouth after watching Coda is Emilia Jones was wasted on Lock and Key.
Absolutely.
I mean, she's so good in this movie, and that show was so bad, and it had nothing to do with her.
Yeah. we love the graphic novel. We were so excited for the show.
Yeah.
The show's not good. Emilia Jones doesn't really pop in it by any stretch. I don't know if there's anything really good there to work with. But she does do. In my opinion, she does some really good stuff with this.
Yeah, and she was not nominated for this movie.
I don't think so.
Correctly. That is insane. That is insane to me.
Yeah.
There
was some age prejudice there, I think.
Clearly. And you kind of made a comment about
it being a little like, I thought maybe you would think the movie was a little hallmarky.
Yeah.
A little bit maybe heavy-handed at times. But did you think that, or what did you think?
I mean, I could see where you would think that.
Yeah.
I could definitely see where you would think that. And I'm going to say no. Like, I think situationally, yes. Like, if you were just to read the synopsis, is this like a, CW Hallmark, Lifetime, that kind of made for TV afternoon special kind of movie? Yes. Like, if you read that, I could see how people would think, oh yeah, this could definitely be that. And even a little bit, when because I did watch the trailer real fast before I watched it, and I was like, I'm just kind of curious. And yeah, I mean, even with that, I was like, I could kind of see how you could think that. But again, it is elevated so much higher than that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the performances and the writing, and it was really able to take something that could just feel kind of trite and really made it so much better.
Yeah. I think maybe when I saw it the first time, I felt some of those like maybe a hair Hallmark-ish, but the more I watch it, the more I love it, and I feel that less and less. I do think, is the movie safe in some ways? Probably, like, do the things that you think are going to happen early on pretty much happen? Yes, but they do so in a very fulfilling way. To me, it's kind of like, say you're gonna watch a biography movie or a movie about World War II. Like, the ending. It's not always about what the ending is. Sometimes it's about how you get there.
Yeah, definitely. And with a movie like this, where there is going to be those family struggles, that idea of, oh, well, she wants this thing, she wants to sing, and that's something her family clearly doesn't get behind. That, as they are, then they start this side business to kind of pull
Right.
themselves out of their situation, which again is something that, she is also kind of trying to do. That there's going to be those moments, there's going to be those scenes where she fails somebody,
Right.
whether it's her music teacher
Yeah.
or her family or herself or whatever, those scenes are going to be there, and they're there, but the execution makes it, overcome that predictability.
Right.
you know
Right.
and it's funny because I remember years ago when Gone Girl came out, and so many people like said that it was like the most expensive Lifetime movie ever made.
Right.
So it's kind of funny to kind of like compare that to something like Coda, because I liked Gone Girl too, but like with something like Coda, it was just this idea of like this core story is something that you see for, like I said, made for TV.
Sure.
But these kind of movies are winning Oscars.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about it in the last couple podcasts where it's like it's the journey that the characters go on that I get bought into. And we talked about in the last podcast with Harold and Maude. When you have these people that are like an opposite ends of the spectrum. Harold was in summarization in one word, death. Maude was life, and then throughout the movie you see these things come together. And, in this movie you could start off, you think, you have a deaf family, you have a child that loves music, so they're maybe not as far apart as death and life,
Right.
but they are on opposite ends of a certain kind of spectrum, and then you see them come together, strained, family relationships that come together, and it's still rewarding when it feels earned. I just feel like this movie excels with conflict. I think that Ruby, the main character, who we said is played by Emilia Jones, they do such a good job of putting her in conflict with every character. And I think what's unique about the movie is like this: there's no antagonist to this movie. There's no villain character. The villain of the movie is circumstance.
Definitely.
And you can take everybody's side, which makes the conflict, I think, so compelling. All the characters in this movie create adversity for each other, but they don't do it maliciously, right? It's out of what they think is best for themselves in that moment, or for Ruby long term, or for the family. So it's kind of like the old thing they talk about with Marvel movies, like, why is Thanos a good villain? Because you can see his side. And I
Right.
feel in this movie you can see everybody's side. So I wanted to ask you about some of the characters, and we can kind of, I think, maybe just go through the movie, maybe character by character, and attack it that way. So let me start off with the teacher character, Mr. V.
Sure.
And I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name because he tells you not to in the movie.
Villalobos.
Sure.
Bernardo. Kind of do the
And I'm
rolling of the R.
there. Yeah, you have to roll your R's.
Have to roll your R's.
So I think he has some strong scenes. Like, I am a teacher and coach myself, and so sometimes I don't really like or buy into scenes where, like, we are changing your life in this scene by the way I'm yelling at you, or the life lesson I'm teaching you through this hidden metaphor. Nobody has done it as good as Karate Kid, but I think I like his scenes, and I like the way he challenges Ruby.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think, unlike a Mr. Miyagi type character, it's less in metaphor with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a couple times when he, like, when there's that scene where they're at his house, and he, it's kind of like delving into her, like, you come from a deaf family, like, what does a deaf person sound like?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so he's kind of like trying to, in a way, maybe use that as a metaphor, when really it's just he's trying to evoke sound from her.
Right.
And it's, so I can appreciate those scenes with him a little bit more, because it doesn't come off as cliche in that way,
Yeah.
because it's not so like it doesn't feel so phony.
Yeah, I think there's a believability to like what Ruby's struggling with singing because she's trying to sound pretty, and I think it's an interest. They kind of play up in the movie. She used to sound, in her opinion, ugly because she talked, in quotes, like a deaf person.
Right.
And so I think it's just an interesting like mental hurdle that she is like, she has to sound pretty, but that's not what singing is to Mr. V, or
Right.
that's not what her best singing is. And so when he's challenging that, I think it seems just more compelling to me.
Right. Well, and again, it's kind of that understanding the idea of sound, which again is kind of that interesting element of a movie about a deaf family who can't experience sound the way that everybody else does. Like there is ways to experience sound. Clearly, like her father with his obsession with rap music,
Sure.
because like he feels the vibration, which that's a pretty common theme in movies where the hearing impaired interact with music, that kind of thing. I know, like in Mr. Holland's Opus, there's like a part when like his son lays the speaker down and he like presses his head against it so he can hear it, feel it, I should say. So but with the teacher character, like I was a musician in school all the way through school and into college. Like I played music the whole time, so I've had
some great teachers.
I have had great teachers. In fact, I had a music teacher named Mr. V, surprisingly enough. So that was kind of fun. But and each of them kind of had their own different style about how they would kind of get you where they wanted you to be, as far as your instrument and the music that you were playing. And with this character, it's always funny because in a movie, like any movie, your character has to jump off the screen and grab you,
right.
And it gets you kind of bought into who they are and what they're trying to do. And I think this character did that almost immediately.
He brings energy right off the bat.
Exactly, and he's very observant. So like he obviously clearly understood pretty quickly that Ruby had joined choir because of the boy. Miles, thank you. Miles. And so he was pretty quick on the uptake on that.
Yeah.
So and I think it was great the way that he was able to kind of push that relationship forward.
Yeah.
Through the duet, which pays off later, and obviously we'll talk about later because that whole scene is incredible. But and he kind of not only teaches her about sound, but also kind of teaches her to be fearless, because fear drives a lot of these characters in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And as we go through them, we'll articulate that a little bit more. But I think that was one of the things that I think that I appreciated most about the Mr. Villalobos character is his ability to push Ruby past fear.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of the conflict he then puts her in is she's spread so thin, as we mentioned. The family starts up a business and they're very reliant on her, and they need her because they expect Ruby to be the person that speaks to the hearing abled for them, and so they need her. He thinks that she needs to be spending some time working on this audition to get into college because he sees a career or a future in music for her. And so when she's kind of being late or kind of just being spread too thin and not able to do both, he challenges her to pick music. In a way, and Ruby kind of feels like he's making her do something that without her family, that on her own.
Right.
And it is, again, to me, it's a conflict that I understand both sides.
Yeah.
So I can buy it. Like, it wasn't something where the teacher was just like, you can't be late. If you're ever late again, then you're fired or, whatever. Right. and it just kind of seems like it's just conflict for conflict's sake. But they do a good job of explaining, many of these lessons Mr. V's doing privately at his house.
Yeah.
Like he's got his own family that he's taking time away from. So it's just, there's just that, buyability into where he's coming from, what Ruby needs, but you're on Ruby's side too. Yeah. And so it's like, as a viewer, you're kind of like, man, what am I rooting for here? It's tough.
It is tough
in a good way.
It's true. And I was kind of thinking about it because, Hitchcock has always, has said it, said in the past about how, you always root for the protagonist,
Right.
however bad they are, if you're
Right.
writing a movie about a robber, you're gonna root for the robber, and it's just kind of inherent in a lot of the way that filmmaking is done. And so in those scenes where he is kind of being very hard on her,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you need to be here on time, and like, I did find myself like almost like wanting to jump to her defense and be like, look, man, like,
Yeah.
I get it, like,
She's
you want her to
stressed
be
out.
here, but you gotta understand what's going on in their family, man. I
Right.
mean, come on. So
Right.
like, I definitely, I get where you're coming from
Yeah.
about seeing both sides, because you're right, like, you want her to succeed, you want her to go down the path that he wants her to go down as well, into
Yeah.
music, go to
Well,
Berkeley,
you
all
know,
of that.
because if she doesn't, she
But
might not ever get out of this loop.
right,
You know, she's going to waste the talent. This is the chance. This is the time.
right. But you also understand like her frustration as well, because
Yeah.
you're like, she's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I
Right.
can't, my family, this, they've just started this business and they're doing all these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's it brought me into his character and their relationship as a teacher student for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, let's move on. I guess one of the characters that maybe I am probably least attached to would be, we mentioned Miles, the
Yeah.
boyfriend slash love interest. You know, he presents some hurdles in some conflict in an more funny way at first. It's they're studying together at her house or singing
Right.
together at their house, and
Yes.
unbeknownst to the parents that they're there, and the parents engage in coitus, and they weren't quiet
Coitus?
about it.
You mean coitus?
They weren't quiet about it, and so that leads to Ruby having to stop this act from occurring, and then the parents want to talk about it with Ruby and
Oh, man.
Miles, and that is a very brilliant scene.
Oh yeah, it's easily one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, because I mean, it's like, how can I take this uncomfortable situation and just
Turn it
jack
up to
it to
11.
make it
Yeah,
12?
yeah.
Forget 11, let's take it to 12. But this goes to 12. I mean, and obviously we'll get to her dad,
Yeah.
because he is a scene stealer and
Yeah.
a half in this movie. But yeah, and so obviously that scene is great for a lot of reasons. It's great because of him specifically, but the way that Miles reacts is always great. And yeah, so it's funny because that scene sets up this comedic moment, but it leads to something
Right.
that's so heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because he probably in
Fairness to him,
somewhat innocently,
Yeah.
tells a friend, regales a friend with this, that, what had happened, and then obviously it gets around because it's high school. Everybody
Sure.
tells everybody everything.
Everybody's terrible.
Exactly, people are terrible. So yeah, like it's and especially teenagers, because
Yeah.
they love to tell people things, and
Well,
especially funny stories, especially about a kid that they already
Is
are,
on the
have a
outskirts,
propensity
yeah.
to make fun of. So
Yeah.
it's like, what did you expect to happen, man? But
Yeah.
I do not, think he did it intentionally. He just
No.
kind of stepped in it.
Yeah. Again, this is the conflict where you can take both people's sides, and you can be very upset for Ruby, but because it's like, yeah, don't tell the whole school that
Yeah.
my parents were having sex. But like we said, the scene where where the parents were explaining it, the dad was purposely being funny and being
Yeah.
obscene, trying to, in ways to make light of it and to harass Ruby as any parent would. But, so when Miles leaves that situation and thinks it's funny and then just tells people what he thought was a joke,
Yeah.
it's different for Ruby, because Ruby doesn't see, and that's the thing, I guess, the most interesting thing with Miles, and they just touch on it, is that he sees Ruby's family different than Ruby sees Ruby's family. Ruby's embarrassed by her family. She's embarrassed by her house. She just, she feels, I guess, embarrassed that she does have to do so much for them, that they, that they're so dependent on her.
Right.
But Miles doesn't see that. Miles sees that they do stuff together, that they love each other,
Right.
and so he's jealous of that a little bit, and that's why he, it's not. I think when he told his friends about it, he thought it was more cool in a way that Ruby's parents can actually show affection, where he kind of states that his don't.
Right. Yeah, that scene in the hallway when he kind of does come clean, and like, it is always interesting when you can take a character and really change their perspective. And that scene I think really did that for Ruby, where it was like, look, you might, you think you have a terrible life for X, Y, and Z, or whatever, and you think his life is great. Well, he thinks your life's great in a lot of ways, and his is terrible.
Yeah.
So it's that
I think that's true in high school too.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody thinks that.
Without question, that's true. And it's all about perception. And, I think especially now, I mean, it's not like, they go into it in great detail or anything, but, I'm sure with social media and stuff like that now and the curation of your life, that kind of thing is quite easy to do. You put up that fake facade and, you're able to kind of live by it. And I'm not saying he did that in this movie, who knows, as far as they didn't necessarily go into his day to day, but how he carried himself. But, but it was something that I appreciated, from a viewing standpoint, because, they didn't see any character really as a throwaway, which I really appreciated. And like, this is a character that could have been a throwaway character. And
yeah, he other than what we're explaining now, he pushes Ruby in very small, almost no other way, really.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, I actually really love the ending where he didn't get in and she did.
Yeah.
And especially because he didn't even want to go.
Right.
He ends up confessing that to her. The only reason he does music is because it's expected of him. So it's like, that idea that, that's expected of him. What Ruby does is expected of her. It's really kind of pointing out these similarities between people that are often overlooked, by somebody else in a different situation, whether it's a grass is greener, idea or whatever. And I really appreciated that. And I think it made what could have been like this kind of cliche teen relationship into something that I think was ultimately way more meaningful.
Great. Okay, let's get into the immediate family. I think there's three characters here that are very interesting in their own ways.
Sure.
But let's start with the brother.
Yeah.
So Ruby has an older brother. He's about 21-ish, 22-ish.
Well,
let's say he's young because he does end up hooking up with Ruby's friend
who's still in high school. And you're like, oh,
and we're going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's old and 18.
Exactly.
And he is young and 21. So they're pretty close. All right. But the family are fishermen. The dad and the brother and Ruby go out on the boat every morning and fish.
Yeah.
So her brother's a fisherman with her dad, and there are issues at the docks about people getting fair pricing and all this kind of stuff. And I think where the brother is interesting is because as you kind of mentioned, the family starts up their own business, where they instead of this auction for fish, I guess they're buying directly, and they're doing the selling themselves. They're becoming the middleman instead of using a middleman, essentially. And it's almost more like Ruby challenges the brother, because the brother's older and wants to be seen by his parents as responsible and able to kind of be the next patriarch of the family, maybe. But they're so dependent on Ruby having to do everything for them. Where Ruby does the translations. Ruby talks to the hearing-abled people, not him. And Ruby even undercuts him sometimes, where he was trying to work and sell some fish, and then she undercuts him. And so you kind of see this guy who wants to fit in. He has a scene where he wants to go to the bar with the guys, but he can't hear them, and he doesn't really read lips that well. And tell me what you thought about their relationship and how it all worked.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship. Sibling relationships are always interesting. In a movie, that inherent hierarchy of a family.
Yeah.
And you typically think the older siblings are the in charge of the children. It's like middle management.
Right.
They're middle management. And in this situation, that you're right, that's not how it is for various reasons. I mean, the most obvious being, like you said, Ruby is their key to the briar, right? Their interpreter, their key to the wider world. And I think it's interesting because there is part of it with the brother that is jealousy.
Sure.
Again, being the older sibling, wanting to have more responsibility, wanting to be seen as, like you said, like the next in line of succession, if you will, going that route. But I think the other part of it, and it's I think more undertones than anything he says, is he does genuinely care about Ruby and sees the cage that has kind of been built for her, whether it's built by her family, by herself. Again, that situation,
Yes.
not the
Yeah.
no specific or antagonist, just the situation that she finds herself in. So, I think that actually endeared him to me in a lot of ways, because I do think, a character like that could be seen as just, like I said earlier, jealous, maybe vindictive,
Right.
Something like that. But, I do think he genuinely cares about her and wants her to be happy. I
Yeah.
think the scene at the musical performance, which again I know we'll get into more
Yeah,
eventually,
definitely.
you could see that in his face, and the kind of a pride, that he had in Ruby and what she's doing. Whether he could hear her or not, he could I'll use the word spiritually hear her. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Right.
From where he was sitting, and like see, the aura around her and what she was doing, and taking pride in that, and wanting more for her than just, working on a fishing boat.
Yeah.
And I think especially when he, finds out, oh well, she wants to go to Berkeley College of Music. Well, that's great. Like, she should do that. You know
Right.
what I mean? And part of it's for himself, but it is
Exactly.
for her.
Yeah.
And I think, that made that, again, that kind of depth deepened
Right.
that relationship and that character greatly.
Yeah. It's like, does he want Ruby to leave? In some ways, yes.
Yes,
But
obviously.
but so does she, but he knows that she does too. So it's like this kind of bad thing, but our interests get mutually aligned.
Right.
Which is kind of, which, like you said, it gives the character good depth. And I think, they have a blow up at one point. And I will say, the one thing I don't like about the brother character, and this was some of the hallmarky I thought when I watched originally too, is maybe 2 or 3 times in the movie, like where like the family's kind of brushing him off, and he kind of slams the table down and walks off all dramatically, but nobody really notices that he's upset. It's like,
Right.
he's tired of being ignored, and thus, as he leaves and makes a scene, he's ignored. So,
Right. Yeah.
but so I thought maybe that was a little over the top or a little on the nose. But after him and Ruby have a blow up late in the movie, and they're kind of having their makeup speech, and or they hardly make up, but he's kind of telling Ruby that you need to go. Like, we
Yeah.
don't need you.
Yeah.
So don't use us as your excuse to stay back and not challenge yourself. Like, you need to go.
Yeah.
And she's like, Ruby doesn't think that he can handle talking to hearing enabled people, and his pushback is, I don't have to. This is our business. They should adapt to us. And I liked that message.
Well, absolutely. And I think another really interesting thing about the brother is he is the only one that I feel like isn't afraid of change.
Right.
And Ruby's afraid of change.
Yeah.
Her parents are afraid of change. Again, it's like they've kind of stagnated. They've been in this situation for so long. With Ruby as the interpreter on the fishing boat, it's like it's very routine. It's almost like they're just on autopilot at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Leo, his name is Leo.
His name
I
is
just
Leo.
thought about it. Leo. I'm going to refer to him as Leo. Due respect. So Leo is the only one who really, I think, wants to see everything kind of shuffled. He realizes that there needs to be a change.
Right.
And that's why in the meeting, when he's like, oh, and we'll promise you we'll get you double, and double for your fish, and Ruby's like, double? What the hell are you doing? And he's like, I don't know, it sounded good, because he was willing to really like risk it. Right, exactly.
To get the biscuit, he wanted to risk it.
He wanted to risk it, exactly. Not sitting on his biscuit. So right. I think that is one thing that's really great about the Leo character, is his propensity for change, and his fearlessness in that. And obviously, as we said, his dating Ruby's friend is we're gonna assume age-wise this all works out. It's great. But man, I have to say, maybe this is the softie in me, but man, when he's at the bar after he gets punched and she like comes out and she automatically realizes, well, I don't know sign language. Right. Obviously, I can't talk to him because clearly she, and has already confessed that she has herpes apparently from earlier on.
It's a joke.
And exactly. She pulls out the cell phone
and they start texting
back and forth to one another. Like, Okay, that was pretty
cute.
adorable. It was cute. It was pretty adorable. It was an adorable moment. I really appreciated that, and kind of it almost felt like this odd meet cute moment,
Mhm.
and I thought they played that really well. Just again, softy and me, that was great. I really appreciated that.
I agree. I agree. Somebody else who's great in this movie, I think, is Marlee Matlin, who plays Ruby's mom.
Yeah.
So we'll switch. We'll shift gears and start talking about her. I rambled on a lot about the brother because I can gush over these characters. I really like them.
Yeah.
How did you think? What did you think about the mom and Ruby's relationship?
Well, I there's I think some very interesting themes with Jackie. Her name is Jackie. Marlee Matlin plays Jackie. I have it here.
You can call her Jackie. I will refer to her as mommy.
Is mommy. Exactly. No, obviously, Marlee Matlin is she's an icon at this point.
National treasure.
Yeah, I mean, she has been a advocate or an ambassador, I should say, an ambassador for the deaf community for decades.
Mhm.
I remember her, having a bit part in The Player.
She seems ageless.
I know, and she is absolutely ageless. It is fantastic. Whatever you're doing, whatever skin regiment you're doing, keep doing it. It's fantastic. But but I think again, she maybe more than any other character, maybe it is between her and Ruby, does embody the fear
Mhm.
element that I was mentioning before, and it's not uncommon for mothers to kind of embody that in the sense of my babies are growing up and they're leaving. That's a
Right.
very common thing in movies.
Yes.
Almost cliche, but a lot of things are cliche because they're true. And so there you go. Like so she definitely has that,
Mhm.
and she also has the
But I do think there's an extra layer to that because they are so dependent on Ruby.
exactly. I was getting ready to say, yeah. So and especially now that they're starting this business,
Yes.
and that is something that it's scary, in that
Yeah.
situation. Like at that point, they've already been kind of pushed out of their comfort zone. She was obviously not happy when they decided they were gonna break off and do this business on their own, but then they did it. So you're
Yeah.
kind of in it, and you got to do it. So she was buying in, and she was going for it. So that was great, and so she has fear on that angle. Like, well, this is now going to fail because Ruby's not here, and we need her to succeed.
Right.
Um,
She didn't think that she could make friends with the other hearing employees or other moms or whatever.
Right.
So she was scared.
It's
Yeah,
co-op.
wives.
It's a co-op
Yeah.
situation. So like all the fishermen kind of have
Yeah.
a role within this organization.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was scared to challenge herself too.
Right. Well, and that was interesting because and there was that scene when she referred to them as hearing bees, if you will, and I think and in that moment, Ruby's like, well, maybe if you didn't call him, hearing
B words,
then maybe you'd be able to make friends with him. And I think that was one of the interesting things, that maybe the most interesting thing that the Jackie character really kind of embodied was this prejudice towards the hearing community, not because it was like I'm better than you. It was a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
It's this isolation
Right.
that they've kind of self-imposed. Having Ruby kind of being that intermediary, but still that kind of isolation, and that comes from, I think, a place of fear. It does come from a place of the world not necessarily being that welcoming as
Mhm.
well. So there is some,
for sure.
understanding of it.
It's justified fear in a lot of ways.
Right. But it's something that is very interesting because it's a different kind of prejudice, and it's because they face a different kind of
Yeah.
prejudice as well, and theirs is the prejudice towards them, the deaf community is, well, you can't hear, so I'm
You're
better than
disabled.
you, right?
Yeah.
It's like the high school girl that was like making fun of Ruby because her parents are deaf. Like, I never get that in movies or shows where it's like, oh yeah, well, your parents are dead. Ha ha. Like, is that a joke? Like, God, like
That's a high school joke.
Is it a high school joke?
I think I've said that before.
That is terrible. Like, good Lord. I mean, how is that a burn? I mean,
Yeah.
or like your parents are deaf. Like, okay, like
True.
yes,
Factual
that's
statement
true.
made.
Factual statement.
Yeah.
I don't know what I mean. But again, like, but where that comes from in that situation is like, I'm better than you, and
Yeah.
I'm better than them, and you're weird, and I don't understand you, and all of that. So, that prejudice, them facing that is difficult, and it creates this cocoon that they've kind of made around themselves, and it kind of they force themselves, especially like the Jackie character, like you were mentioning with the other fishermen's wives.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to get out there and even try,
Right.
because I know I can't do this, and it's that place of fear.
Yeah.
So instead of admitting that it's a fear, it's you puff up your chest and you act big and bad, like, oh, I don't like, they're all terrible, blah,
Right.
and it kind of comes off, like, again, as kind of a prejudice. But obviously by the end she overcomes it, which
Sure.
is great, and I think that is a very important part of her character.
Yeah.
Again, kind of pushing through the fear, because again, fear really runs through most of these characters. And then again, being able to accept Ruby, and I think that there is, early on in the movie, that idea of projection of, we kind of
We
talked
talked
about
about this in Harold and Maude. Yeah.
where there's that projection of who you think your kids should be. Like,
Yeah.
whether it's, like yourself, or sometimes it's not, sometimes it's, I don't want you to be me, and
Right.
I'm not saying that's in this movie, but in other movies, it's kind of another kind of spin
Trope.
on that, right? Like, I don't want you to be like me, so I'm going to push you so hard to not be me. You know
Right,
what I mean?
yeah.
Don't make the same mistakes I did. I didn't go to college. You go to college, things like that.
Yeah.
But for her, it's more like, like the scene when she told her she wants to be a singer, and she's like, well, if I was blind, you would just want to paint. Like, making it all about her and not, seeing Ruby as a person.
Yeah, there's this dismissiveness toward both their kids, really, with the brother, where she doesn't think the brother can be helpful,
Right.
and she doesn't mean it in a bad way. She just says, you can't read lips well, you can't hear, you're deaf.
Yeah.
So we need Ruby, not you. And the brother takes great offense to it, and the mom doesn't really see it.
Yeah.
Like you said, with Ruby, she kind of dismisses that Ruby actually likes music, because she just she thinks it's just something her kid is just saying because she just wants to be different. She just wants to be a contrarian.
Yeah.
And so it's like we said in Harold and Maude, that mom is very over the top, and it's very obvious what they're doing here. But where I think with Jackie, with Ruby's mom, it's a lot more. There's more subtlety to it, and it feels realer.
Yeah.
I think I have a lot more believability to it, and I think it kind of leads to a really great scene where Jackie enters Ruby's room, and they just have this conversation, this kind of make-up conversation. And mom kind of says, flat out, like, when the doctor told me you could hear,
Yeah.
my heart sank.
Yeah.
But then she admits, again, going back to fear, that she was scared they weren't ever going to be able to connect. And obviously not being deaf, and I really don't know anybody who's deaf. I just felt like that there was just felt of like a very genuine fear that I never would have thought of.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of I don't know, it rounded out the mom for me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. But obviously, we got to talk about.
Yeah, we got to talk
The
about the dad,
dad.
and I think when we talk about the dad character, I think there's a couple entire family scenes that I want to get to that I think are really really well done, and one of them obviously is my favorite one, and then we'll say that for last.
Right.
But yeah, so Ruby's dad is great.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Played by Troy Kotsur. Let me double check. Yes. Ruby's dad is great. Played by Troy Kotsur.
Yeah.
He won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor.
Deservedly so.
Yes. He says one word of dialogue in the entire movie. Word of dialogue.
Right. One word.
But he does speak throughout the movie. But
he had me. He had me with that word.
He does.
Damn.
We'll get to it. But,
Yeah.
But yeah. So the dad is great. He's an interesting character. We've said a lot about him already. We mentioned the scene where he embarrasses Ruby to no end with the explanation of to Miles about him and his wife having sex.
Right.
It was great, and it summarizes his playfulness. Even if it's at Ruby's expense a little bit, it does a good job of summarizing his playfulness. he's he can be very Joe Cool. He tries not to overly worry about things. He just wants to keep chugging along and kind of get things done.
Yeah.
But he does ask a lot of Ruby. Again, he has this need for Ruby, and I I don't know. To me, the best part of conflict that I just want to jump into with him, and you can circle back to some other things, would be there is a day when Ruby is supposed to work on the boat and she doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Of course, the day she doesn't show up is the worst day possible. They have somebody that joins their boat, like a
It was
observer,
yeah.
Who is reporting to some higher ups in the fishing community.
Right.
Can't exactly tell you what they
Right.
were at this
It's
moment.
more of a governmental thing. It
Yeah.
seems about like as far as like
Yeah.
climate change.
So what ended up happening was, without Ruby there, they're not able to communicate with this lady. They
Mhm.
miss some messages coming on the radio. The boat ends up getting boarded, and long story short, the dad ends up losing his fishing license.
Yeah.
The dad's very upset at Ruby. Ruby didn't tell him that she was going to miss work.
Yeah.
And so, but again, the conflict. Ruby deserves a day off. Ruby
Right.
was doing something
Well,
for
and not
herself.
only that, but she was mad at that point because that was like post
Mhm.
blow up about school and all of that.
Right.
So it was like not only was she deserves a day off, but she was also mad.
Yeah. Right, she was mad, but yeah, and so she was probably trying to point a little bit. Again, I can feel like I see both sides. That's probably but again, you have this dad who, in a lot of ways, is very demanding of his daughter, but it doesn't ever come across like that. That's part of the reason why I think he's really well written.
Yeah, no, I can agree. It's a little more subtle with her father than with her mother.
Yeah.
Like as far as like and I think part of that is just his happy-go-lucky nature. Like
Mhm.
even in moments of stress, like he seems not at ease, but there is a coolness. I'll use that word. I hate to use it, but it's like a coolness about him where he's just like, he always has something to say. You know what I mean? And I think he succumbs to the fear just like everybody else.
He's afraid to try to work with the other people around, the other fishermen around him. He thinks that they're the outcasts.
Right. But he's also not afraid to be himself. In certain, like,
Sure.
as we talked about the moment, like in the scene with Miles.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like clearly, like even though he is sitting across from a hearing person, like he is fully willing to be himself in that moment.
Yeah.
And there's various reasons why. Again, like you were kind of saying about like razzing Ruby in that
Sure.
in that situation, but just kind of finding the humor in it as well.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
maybe trying to like just trying to
Make light of it.
Yeah. Right, just trying to reduce the tension. But that kind of situation. But he maybe more so, it's kind of maybe like a gradation where like he kind of straddles the line of fear a little bit more
Mhm.
than like let's say like Leo, who seems like very much open to change. Like
Sure.
he kind of straddles the line a little bit more. I think for him it's more not for Ruby it's less about the fear of her going and more about like I like this situation. I like my family being together. I like this kind of being who our family is, the fishing boat and the fishing, and that kind of thing. So I do think that's kind of interesting compared to like let's say her mother,
Mhm.
where I feel like in that instance fear does kind of play a little bit of less of a role in it. But I definitely agree with what you were saying about like when you're losing the license, like like he
Yeah.
has to have somebody on the boat who can hear, so he would
Well,
like it to be Ruby.
Well, yeah. Well, I think he said many times that
Yeah.
it had to be Ruby. They couldn't afford a translator.
Right, and there's
Like,
money,
so
the
so, I
money
mean,
aspect of it for sure.
he definitely puts that pressure on her to do it. And
Fair.
even when Ruby's like, I'll give up college and I'll do it. And he says, "Are you sure?" But it's kind of like, I've already accepted that you said you'll do this, and this, "Are you sure?" is kind of not as you can't back out now anyway.
Right.
In my opinion. So that's what I said.
Sure.
I think there is that subtlety to his demands on her, but she feels it. That's why she gets so spread so thin throughout the movie, where she's trying to balance helping the family, she's trying to balance going to music rehearsal and have a social life, and she's failing,
Right.
and she ends up failing basically at all of those parts, because
Right.
that's a great second act of a movie, and then
Right.
then you come together. So
Yeah.
I did want to ask, to me there's like I guess, 2 or 3 just really strong family scenes that I think just always clinch the movie for me. One early on, they're having dinner at just outside the house, and Ruby's trying to do some studying, and everybody else is so loud, but obviously
Right.
they can't hear how loud they are,
Right.
and just kind of shows this struggle where it's like Ruby's trying to do what she's supposed to do. She's trying to do her homework,
Mhm.
but the dad's like cleaning the grill because he just finished cooking some chicken. And he's just banging on the grates really loudly.
Right.
The brother's going through Tinder. The mom's banging dishes as she's like washing dishes, preparing for dinner. Nobody's doing anything bad. Nobody's
Right.
being rude, but it just kind of shows that this way that they live in these 2 different worlds,
Mhm.
and that's kind of a thing they stress.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it again, it's all kind of about perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that in this movie where you know they kind of play around with perspective, like you said with the Miles character, in that one scene. But even in this scene, like within the family, there's different perspectives.
Right.
It almost like feels in a way like a fish out of water story,
Sure.
almost in some ways.
No,
But
definitely.
it's her water.
Right.
You know what I mean?
She's a really good swimmer.
Right. It's like it's her water. Like this is where she lives, but she kind of feels also kind of out of it at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think but it's also like kind of what we're saying with her mom. Where she was worried that they wouldn't connect. It's almost kind of like the same thing. So it's like like they both are aware of
Mhm.
the dual worlds that they live in, and I think that there is a certain I'll use the word fear. I mean, it just seems kind of be the theme, so I'll just continue with it. Fear, of like, kind of breaking this routine, I
Yeah.
guess, that they're in. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's hard. I guess.
Well,
To
the
kind of
family is
articulate, but
dependent.
it's-
Yeah, the family is.
Yeah.
I mean, we think we have the family is dependent on Ruby,
Right.
and they are overly dependent. As the brother tries to stress, they're too dependent. They don't need to be as dependent as they are, but the family, the dad and the mom especially, are stuck in. Ruby does this for us. This is essentially her job in the family.
Yeah.
And that's what we expect.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And then as Ruby's getting to that point where she's trying to go off to college, that doesn't work for her anymore. And Ruby is stuck feeling like, well, how do I? Well, hey, actually, the next thing I want to talk about was when she first actually talks to the family about wanting to go to college.
Right.
And, I feel like she articulates there that she's stuck between how do I do what I love
Mhm.
when it pulls me away from who I love.
Right.
What I love is going to pull me away from who I love,
Sure.
or who I love is keeping me from doing what I love. And again, to me, that's good conflict.
Right. Well, absolutely. Well, and it's also great conflict because both sides are kind of trying to do the same thing.
Nobody's wrong.
Right. Nobody's wrong. In fact, they're both trying to better their situations for what they want to be doing. The dad and the brother and even the mom. Like
Well,
they want to grow this fishing business.
Right,
They want to
for
have
the family.
For the family. They want to have this
Not
bigger
just for
stake.
themselves, yeah.
Right. This bigger stake. They want to be able to have more control over their own destiny, their own lives. Totally understandable. And that's exactly what Ruby wants.
Right.
But the problem is it's pulling them in 2 separate directions.
Right.
And somebody's got to give.
Somebody's got to give. How do you overcome this gap?
Yeah, somebody's got to give. So, and I think part of it is just growing up. Again, kind of this is a coming of age story,
Sure.
if you will. Graduating, moving on. Realizing that life is what you're going to make of it.
Yeah.
And in some regards, I think it is that way for the parents because again, they have just kind of like in a lot of these types of movies, the parents also have to realize that life is going to move on.
Right.
These are people. Your kids are people. They
Right.
are who they are, and they're going to be people whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the coming of age isn't just for Ruby; it's for the parents too.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of asked before, like so we've kind of talked about this divide now between Ruby and the family. So how do you overcome that gap? Well, the movie does it.
Yeah.
Via the performance, the choir's performance scene, which to me it's my favorite scene in the movie. I think it's brilliant.
Without question.
Where Ruby is at this massive performance. She's showing the community how talented she is. Her parents are very supportively in attendance,
Right.
but they can't hear anything. There's no interpreters there.
Right.
They are just they're just watching.
Yeah.
They're watching a musical performance. So
Right.
they're not obviously getting any enjoyment out of it. And the movie does a great job of showing their boredom,
Mhm.
they're fixing, the dad notices his shirt's buttoned wrong,
Right.
and they're asking each other what they
What's
should
for
have for
dinner?
dinner,
Yeah.
and
I
they
gotta go
can't
to the
keep
grocery store.
they can't keep track of where they are in the program.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, you would think the family's rude if you didn't know the family up to this point. You're like, they're not rude. This is just like, there's no way they can enjoy this. It's
Right.
not really about, they can see Ruby, but they can't experience what she's doing. Which again, to me, is just like, you say, you've been talking about fear. I keep talking about conflict. I just love this conflict.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it almost feels like an apparent defeat moment in the movie, because, they, one of the things that the parents need, their need is they need to be able to accept Ruby as a person with a life that's going to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to do that when they can't appreciate what she loves the way that she does.
Right.
So this is their moment. This is their moment to see her do it and be able to like fully understand her and all of that, and they can't.
Right.
And I think one of the absolute best emotional moments in the movie is the duet when she's duetting with Miles, and her father is looking around the auditorium and seeing the faces of everybody watching them, watching them being able to understand who Ruby is and what she loves, and
their enjoyment
of it. They're in tears, some of them, and you can see it on his face, the disappointment, the anger, the rage, the sadness. I mean, there's an entire range of emotions that this man gives,
because he's missing out on all that.
Because he's missing out. He can't hear it. He can't understand it, and it's killing him inside. You can see it on his face, but he knows that she's good.
Right.
In that moment, because that's kind of part of it as well. And multiple times in the movie up to that point, they're like, "Well, what if she's not any good?"
Right.
Like, because they can't hear her sing, so they don't. She's
brother,
literally been singing on the boat every day, but they can't hear it, so they don't know.
And the brother even says during the show, like, she's doing good, and Mom's like, "How would you know?" And it was Ruby's friend, his girlfriend. He's like, "Well, she told me," and Mom's like, "Oh, well, maybe she is."
Right. Exactly. So, and I think, and there was also that in that moment too, where is that realization, like, yeah, she really is, like, she really is good, and that pain that he was feeling, and then that culminates in the next scene,
right,
when they get home.
Yeah.
And
Ruby and her dad wants to just kind of take a moment to himself, sit outside, and Ruby decides to join him, and they kind of have a little bit of a convo, and the dad asks her to sing for him, individually. And again, a great callback, because we talked about how the dad loves rap and the vibrations.
Right.
Well, this time when Ruby sings to him, he's putting his hands on her throat, and he wants to feel the vibrations of her throat. That's how he can appreciate what Ruby's doing. And I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining it, but it's a tearjerker for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, because he asked what the song is about,
right?
And then she explains to him what the duet that she did with Miles was about. The song. And he so desperately wants to hear this. He wants to hear it, and so he asks her to sing it for him, and she starts singing, and then like Ray said, he puts his hands on her throat to try to feel those vibrations. And I'm not gonna lie, there is a moment when like he is like he's getting so intense about it. It was like, I'm like, man, this movie's getting ready to take a dark turn, but obviously it didn't. But
thank God,
clearly, thank God. But like you could kind of feel almost his like joy, in being able to, in that way, feel who Ruby is,
right,
and what she loves. Every day she feels what he loves on the water, because that is what he loves, and he knows that she knows that, and can understand it, at least to the point of like being out there doing it, even if she doesn't love it the way he does. But in that moment, he feels what she loves, and really kind of seals that the idea that she needs to go to college.
She does. She does need to go to college. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the family's like, she is good at this. We're making her sacrifice something that we can't. And then they make a group decision that she is going to go to this audition.
Yeah,
she does. The audition is very well done. I think that scene too.
Yeah.
It starts off where Ruby's nervous. She's not doing too great,
Yeah.
and her professor, Mr. V, is on the piano and
Yeah.
purposely messes
So
up.
she can start over.
Gives her a signal like start over and wake up.
Right, and be better.
But then, then in any great kind of like family movie, the family sneaks up to the second balcony,
Right.
and then when she sees them there, she finds the comfort she needs.
Right.
And then
starts signing.
And then she signs. I think that's the
Yeah.
big thing. I think that's the final gap that we were talking about is the family can't enjoy what she does, and then
Yeah.
she finds a way to sing, project, and sign to her family what she's singing, and then there's that bridge that we've kind of been waiting for that's really connecting them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny we kind of mentioned Mr. Holland's Opus earlier, but I mean, they did a whole thing with like lights in Mr. Holland's Opus,
Yeah.
and to like kind of, since Cole was deaf as well, and they kind of did that a thing with lights so that he could kind of see that. And I'm like, the whole movie, I'm like, come on, like let's do something like that. Like there's a lot of different things that they can do, and obviously now that she's going to go to Berklee School of Music, she's going to discover those things.
Right.
And I wouldn't even be surprised if she started, that being an area of study for her,
Sure.
and Ruby beyond the end of this movie is she kind of studies music and interacting with the hearing impaired.
Yeah.
and
Well,
how to-
it's not unjust to say that there's many things that we could do in society to help people that we don't do.
Well,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So the fact
Absolutely.
that there isn't interpreters at the other,
Yeah.
performances isn't, surprising. But
Yeah.
But I think the scene that sealed the Academy Award for the dad was, they finally show that Ruby gets admitted into this college.
Mhm.
She's about to go away, and she's kind of hesitant. There, she's driving off. She stops the car. She comes back. Big family hug, and then
Yeah.
the dad speaks.
Yeah.
We said he said one word. That one word is go.
Yeah.
Go to college, and it again punches you right in the gut.
Right in the gut. When you hear him say that, you're like, oh man, I don't think I can stop the tears. They're
Yeah.
coming. They're
Yeah.
coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the family's going to survive. There's the montage, and that shows that the
Yeah.
mom can relate to the wives, like we said. The dad has a hearing abled person that's replacing Ruby.
Yeah.
The brother is working within the business and going to the bar and making friends. Like
Yep.
the family will be fine. They've challenged themselves.
Yeah.
Without Ruby, they're going to be fine. Ruby, we know, is going to be fine.
Yeah. Push through that fear, which again is, I think, the big part of it. Fear of change is a common thing, and that's really what this family was struggling with. And I think in the end, it really nailed it.
Yeah. So, all right, Rob. So, I mean, we kind of spoil this, like me asking, "Hey, did you like the movie?" Because
Right.
I think we've talked glowingly about the first couple movies that in our podcasting career that we've presented to each other. We haven't really met many bumps in the road, I don't think. But
Right.
tell me, I guess, your final impression of the movie. Did you like it? It feels like you liked it. Did you like it more than you thought you would, or go into that for me?
Yeah, I will definitely say I liked this movie way better than I thought I would.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily because I thought it was going to be bad going into it. It was more of just like I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
I remember I actually watched this Oscar ceremony where this won Best Picture and everything, and when it won, I was like, oh, okay. Like I hadn't seen the movie at the time, so I was just kind of like, okay, well, this is cool. It seems cool. I just didn't really know anything about it. So
And you didn't have the opportunity to watch it because you didn't have Apple TV Plus.
Right, exactly. So I don't have Apple TV Plus, but now I do. And so yeah, but I will say, yeah, I absolutely enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and I would absolutely 100% recommend it to somebody else. So subscribe to Apple TV Plus so you can watch this movie.
You got Robbie's endorsement, folks. You got to use it.
It doesn't get you any off of your subscription though, so
not yet.
I'm sorry.
Maybe
about
down the
that.
road
Maybe
that'll
down the
happen.
road, but
Years
as of
from
right
now.
now, full price.
Yes.
Sorry, I have no pull with Apple.
All right, Rob. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We finished talking about Coda, but I know you've had to have watched some other stuff this week. What'd you check out?
I have watched a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. The first, I finally kind of got around to watching the Monk movie. So I was always a fan of the show.
Sure.
And there was not a time when Andrea and I would not sit down in an afternoon before we had our son to just a binge an afternoon of Monk on the USA Network. But now that's obviously long been off the air, and they have a movie. Something like they've been doing that with Psych as well.
Yeah.
Another favorite. They've got like 3 or 4 of those movies now. but this is the first one with Monk, and it was pretty good. It was a little dark, actually, a little darker
Really?
than what I would have thought it would be. But it does make me wonder if they're going to either like relaunch the show or maybe do a few more movies.
Yeah,
based
Tony
on how
Shalhoub's
it
not really
ended.
doing anything, so
Yeah, no,
come
but
back
it-
as Monk.
And he's great as Monk. I
All
love him as Monk, so like I would not be opposed to either one of those options. So hopefully that happens. But I do recommend it if you are a fan of the show. Check out the movie. It is definitely. It doesn't feel like a made-for-TV movie. It's
Mhm.
actually pretty fun.
That's a big hurdle to get over.
Absolutely, absolutely. They do a pretty good job with it over there. Like I said, Psych's been doing it too, so they kind of have a little. They've got the formula or whatever under their belt. They know what they're doing. But the other thing I watched is I finally got around to watching The Holdovers.
Academy Award nominee for Best Picture.
Exactly. So I've got around to that, and I highly recommend it. I could probably do an entire podcast with you.
You won't
about,
be because
I won't.
I'm not waiting 3 years
Yeah.
to watch it, but,
Ex-
so that it would fit our rules
Yeah.
for this
It's not
podcast.
a retrospective review.
yeah, I am
but-
going to check it out. So.
Yeah. So, but I am recommending it to you. So definitely it will not be part of the podcast, but I do recommend watching The Holdovers. Paul Giamatti is just absolutely insanely good, as always.
Yeah.
But this is just maybe even to a whole new level. Reteaming with Alexander Payne. After Sideways and all of that. But it's just really, really fantastic. So highly recommend that. But other than that, that's pretty much it, man. What about you?
I haven't got to a ton of stuff. I've been doing a good chunk of reading, but I did I did want to say I finished Echo.
Okay.
I want to mention that because I talked about it on the last podcast,
Uh-huh.
and I said it. I watched episode 1, and I didn't think it was off to a super great start. I will say it's not horrible.
Oh, that's good.
It's watchable.
Okay.
I feel like it's a lot of what like Marvel's kind of doing, where it's like they're so close
Yeah.
to doing some stuff that's really good, and they just like miss, and it's sometimes hard to put your finger on exactly why it missed.
Yeah.
But it does. And this one probably feels too short. It's only 5 episodes.
That's hard.
There's I think maybe like they've got some interesting, and the first episode is really just the reason why I really wondered if it had legs was it was just all of her backstory that we kind of already knew, but filled in some gaps. So I was like, man, that's one of these 5 episodes. But anyway, they do some stuff with some characters that's fun and it's good. To some other characters that you would think there's some room for some really interesting stuff that they don't touch, which is surprising. I'm not sure if it was left on the cutting room floor or what, but it's worth a watch. Like I said, they do succeed at some things. It's Marvel Spotlight, so there's no multiverse in it. If you're not a multiverse fan, don't worry. It's not related to that. It's its own thing.
Sure.
It's not connected to a bigger thing. But it's just somebody that exists in the universe. But it was fine. It was fine. So I just wanted to give it a little bit more recommendation than I did last time. I said it was going to probably be bad. I think it's going to be fine.
Well, I will definitely check it out now, knowing that it is not unwatchable.
It's not unwatchable. It's not unwatchable.
Well, Ray, that about does it for another successful episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.
We made it to the end. We did our job. Now the audience's job is to, on whatever podcast provider you're listening to this, like the podcast, comment on the podcast, tell us what you thought about our opinions, and leave us a 5-star review. We will do our best to read every 5-star review on air.
Absolutely. And if there is a comment section, be sure to leave a recommendation for Ray and I. We are always looking for great new movies to watch that we have not seen. And also, hopefully, maybe one of our other community members will also find a movie that they can like and enjoy. And we will be back in 2 weeks with our new episode, which will be Back to Me.
Aye.
And I'm going to warn you now, it may be the first one I'm not sure you will like.
Okay. The gauntlet's been thrown.
So we will see how that goes. But until then, this is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some